So, you've decided to make your own Christmas gift this year, but you're in a hurry? I will show you a quick, easy gouache gift that you can do right now. I promise you can paint it. Each year, we make a secret Santa in my group of friends with 3 guidelines. It has to be less than 10 euros per gift. It has to be genderless, and it has to be wrapped, but without gift paper, as it's not good for the planet. I usually go to the dollar store, but this year I wanted homemade gifts, and as I'm an artist, I painted them, and I want you to paint yours as well. First is to get a small frame. I'm using 10 by 15 centimeter, and it's a small one, small enough that you can paint in a very small sitting session. You can buy them in a store, of course, and the Swedish giant has tons of it. Or you can find them in your attic, or in a thrift store, it's even better. I wanted them to be all the same, so I bought them. Each one was 1.5 euros, and I took 5 of them. Next, what do you want to paint inside? At first, I thought about evergreen trees, but you can really hang them on the wall for 1 or 2 months in the year. So I wanted something more evergreen. Got it? And I thought about cactus, because cactus is my favorite plant. They come in various shapes and are fun to paint. I'm using watercolor paper with a soft texture, but a bit of texture is great because it will give interesting things at the end. And after tracing the exact shape of my glass, so I know exactly where to start painting, I make a rough sketch of the image, and you have the reference image that is linked in the description under the video if you want to paint yours as well. So very rough drawing and removing the excess graphite on the paper with a kneadable eraser, because gouache is not as opaque as you think it is. Don't ask me why, but I've decided to go with pot first, and it looks like it's a hammered copper with a lot of greens, beige, browns, a lot of colors actually, and it's just trying to reproduce what you see on the image and not what you think it is. This is so crucial. I always say that, but this time it's particularly true. You want to squint, look at the values, and don't bother too much about the rest of it. It will eventually become something interesting, even if I have to come back to some values sometime. This one is a bit tricky to paint because the surface is really strong with all the reflection, but it's also hammered, so it makes a lot of patches of colors. But you can do something simpler with just terracotta or a plain color. I have other examples of what I've been painting this year. It was a cactus year, and I let you see the different ways to paint it. On the left, it's supposed to be a plain color, so I'm just making a solid color, but as there is a shadow on the left side, I have to increase the darkness of the color, and for this I'm adding a bit of brown inside my mix until I get something that is really, really dark. And sometimes I have to go back and fix my values or they are not correct. On the right, I am already going with a very strong dark on the left side, and this is easier when you get the correct value at the first stage. And always remember, if you squint, you will see the values much better. If you're a complete beginner, it will be easier for you to make a solid color in every part of the pot. Just think to make a mix that has enough paint inside to cover the shape of your pot. Because this is a common mistake that beginners do, is not to mix enough paint, and after that you will never be able to get the exact same paint. So think ahead, and it's better if you mix more than you need than the other way around. On the right, I'm blending the colors together with clean water on a clean brush. Once I have placed all my patches of colors and I felt that the borders were a bit too harsh, so I wanted to come back with some fresh water. It's cool, but you have to control the amount of water you are using because it can go messy very quickly. For example, here it's gone messy under the pot, but after trying to rub the color and all I was doing is having the color bleeding into the fresh water, I decided that it was part of the design, that it was something I wanted to do, and it will be kind of the shadow under the pot, because being an artist is also embracing mistakes. Now it's time for the cactus by itself. Basically, it's just a mix of different greens, and I like to use what I have on my palette. This is why I never clean my palette. So I can grab a bit of this, a bit of that. And here it's a ready-made green, kind of, I don't know how to call it, but just a green. And I add inside a bit of ultramarine blue, a bit of turquoise, a bit of white, a bit of yellow, a bit of this and that, just to integrate the colors. And to give the dimension, you have to think like it's an orange. You see, with some quarters, and one side is on the light and one side is on the dark. So you have to adjust your values accordingly. And remember, everything will be covered with white dots, so you don't really need to be too precise at this stage. The only idea is to see the different parts of the cactus. And I have left a space between the plant and the pot to add the gravel. It's just white, supposedly, but there is a part that is in the shadow, and beware to make the shadow the same side that the one on the cactus. And here my light is coming from the right side of it, and as I'm saying this, I'm looking at my pot and I can clearly see that there is a lack of light on the pot that I will be adding. And then making the shadow of the back part of the pot, and it's bleeding again because it was not dry. I've been adding so much water and sometimes, and making the flower with a dry brush so it gets the fluffy effect on the edge, just connecting the flower to the pot, to the cactus. And now let it dry. And I mean it, let it really dry once you have placed the highlight on the pot. This is the most important part. And it's a bit too harsh. So let's blend a bit the colors with fresh water and add a bit of plain white on top of it to really show the light. I'm using a white gel pen to add the tiny white dots. It's fun to do. Just make sure you are using the correct angle with your pen, because sometimes you can press and nothing will print. I like to use acrylic markers as well on top of gouache. It works very well. Just two things you want to remember. First, make sure everything is dry or you will clog the nib of the felt pen with the gouache. And also, if you are using white, make sure the nib is perfectly clean by just using a bit on some scrap paper, so you are getting rid of everything that's inside the nib. Acrylic marker, being water-based, will lift up a tiny bit of the pigment of the gouache inside. So it's really great for the needles, for example, because you are taking a tiny bit of the green inside the yellow. By the way, this is what gets your nib dirty. And sometimes the nib is too big and you need something thinner. Here I'm going with colored pencils for the very fine details on the pot. These are the final touches that will really give life to everything. And it works as well to give details to the flowers or whatever else you want to do. Add texture, fix a value, add more interest to your piece. Colored pencils are just great, and these are regular colored pencils. This is why I told you to take a watercolor paper with a bit of textures, because if you are using a Bristol paper, for example, you won't get the texture that you can get by rubbing just the side of the colored pencil. So you get like a terracotta effect with some textures. It's really cool to do on a texture paper. Once you have finished, it's time to remove it from the pad and cut the excess paper, because otherwise it won't fit inside the frame. Don't forget to sign and date. I like to sign on the back side just because I think, given the small size, if I add my signature on the outside, it will be too visible. Here it is, it's finished. I'm not fond of the color of the frame. I think it would be better with some darker frame, but this is the last one I have. The other one were a bit darker, and it was maybe more appropriate for this type of painting. And if you remember, one of the rules in our game is to wrap it, but without gift paper. And I'm using newspaper, because why not? It's something I have on hand, and I can use it easily to make a wrapping paper. I even made stickers with my cactus painting a while ago when I was making the class, and it's fun to add it on top of the newspaper, otherwise it would be a bit boring. And I'm not adding a tag with the name, as this is a Secret Santa. And if you want to know more, I have a complete class about painting gouache cactus. You have the link in the description under the video. Thanks for watching, happy painting, and don't forget to tag me if you paint something from this video. See you soon!